tension is really important. It's one of the 3 pillars of knowing that you're playing correctly and that your phrasing makes sense. The simplest way to get your phrasing right and get the tension right is that you end a lot of phrases and you target the root note. So that's the root note to the key. So if we were in A minor, my licks, they just come back to A's. And it makes sense. If I don't land on A, you can hear that it's up in the air waiting for a clean resolve on A. There's another way as well. And you might have heard people talking about they're practicing their changes. What that means, it doesn't mean that they're practicing their chord changes. It means that they're practicing soloing across chord changes. In other words, they're targeting, instead of just the root note, they're targeting chord tones. Said differently, a chord has 3 notes in it, or a basic triad does, and you're trying to hit one of those triad notes as a target rather than just the root note to the scale. And ideally you do that when the chord changes on every chord change. Sometimes we don't, but as a skill, and if you want to add a certain amount of melody to what you're doing, definitely something you need. So how I would approach this, you could spend hours or months learning all the chord tones across the whole board. And I'm sure there's people that do it. I've never done that. There is a shortcut. You're welcome. So grab yourself a capo and put it on the 5th fret. The chords we're going to find are A minor and G. So to get an A minor up here, you actually play an E minor chord. And to get a G up here, you actually play a D chord. I'll quickly explain why that works. So in an E minor shape, E string is the root note. So whatever's on that fat string is the root note. So E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So if I put the capo on A, play an E minor, or I could bar it if you're okay with barring. It sounds like an A minor because the root note there is A. And same up here on a D. The root note for a D is the D string, and that note there is a G. So we've got A minor and G. I've put the capo here because it means that we can still keep pentatonic in first position, but we can use what I call chord-stellations. So I want, instead of, you know, like a star constellation, you get all the dots everywhere. So you're going to be picturing where those notes are that make this chord up. So take a snapshot of that and take a snapshot of the D. And then remove the capo, and for the E you'd have, and for the D or the G you'd have. So the challenge now is when the chords go underneath, you're improvising just happily in A minor, but at the point of the chord changing, you introduce that new chord change by hitting one of the chord notes. Now, simplest way to do this is to target one ahead of time. Or what I sometimes do is I'll pick a string. So let's pick the B string, just because it's quite different on each one. So I know that that B string is there for the E minor. I don't know it's here on the D shape for the G. So when the chord is playing on the A, I'm going to come to that one. And then when it goes to the G chord or the D shape, I'm hitting that one. Best way to practice this is with a loop pedal, because you can decide what your chords are and you can just drop them straight into a looper, which I've already done. So I've got 2 bars of A minor, which I've played here. Then then I did 2 bars of G. 1 bar doesn't give you a lot of breathing space, so A, into the G, and you can hear it's really melodic, and we're not worrying about root notes as in to the whole key. Another thing you could do is you could pick a different string or pick 2 strings. So why don't we pick the strings 2 and 3. So on the E minor or the A minor, it's those 2. And when we go to the D shape for the G, it's these 2. All the time in my mind, I'm counting those 8s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then landing on the next chord. There's a video on that, feeling the bars and moving bar on, bar off. So if you're finding it tricky to count while you're playing it, go back to that exercise of you play a bar, you noodle a bar, you play a bar, you noodle a bar, and then translate it to this. To make your own patterns up, what I would do, stick to the key of A minor, because why not, and try and find all the shapes you need with the capo on 5, because that's the right key or the right position for first position, right? So let's go through them. So if you wanted to play a C up here, it's a G. If you wanted to play a D minor, it's an A minor. If you wanted to play an E minor, it's going to be a B minor. So you don't have to bar for a B minor, you could just play the fat one you don't worry about, and then it's the 2nd fret from the capo. Next one's open, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, B minor, technically B minor 7, but it counts as a B minor. Then, so that's the E minor. Then we've got an F, so to play an F, it's a C. Then a G, which is D, and then A minor, which is E minor. So you can make anything up with this set of chords, and I wouldn't keep it too complicated. I would just maybe stick to like 2 chords going back and forward. So you can picture the chord-stellations, and if remembering the whole chord is tricky, like I said, just pick 2 or 3 strings. So if your chord was a C, for those it would give you, so everything's pentatonic. I was going to say, hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully it's enlightening. Hopefully it shows you how to approach these kind of scary concepts in a fairly manageable way. If you've got some cool chord progressions you've made up, then by all means share them and we can all benefit in the wealth. If you haven't got one, I'd get a loop pedal. They're kind of merciless when you start practicing with one, but they're invaluable. They're so good. Sometimes better than a backing track, dare I say, because for this kind of thing, you can determine exactly what the chords are that you want. You don't have to try and get a backing track and shrink it down and get it to loop or anything. I'm sure there's apps and programs where you could just put specifically what you want and it'll play it. So much easier with a looper. You're simultaneously working on your groove and your feel and your rhythm playing. Chord-stellations. That's how we win the game.